So during these Wednesdays of anniversary month, we've had the pleasure of learning the history of our mother shrine, where it all began in Detroit, Michigan, and spread out. And then moving on down on that midnight train to Georgia. last week. I could hear them singing that song as the presentation was going on. Maybe it was just in my head, but I could hear the song and the music playing on that midnight train to Georgia.
Amen. Georgia.
And now we headed west over here to Houston, where everything is bigger in Texas.
Everything.
Talk about the history of Shrine of the Black Madonna number 10.
Man.
And we are in for a treat because we have some of our original cadre members who are going to be joining us, some of our first members who are going to be participating. And also, it's always a treat when we have our presiding bishop, Jaramogi Minally Kamathi, bringing the word. And of course, we have the moderator of all moderators, the Mr. Wokeness himself, Pastor Swad Walker, who's going to be facilitating this evening. I just wanted to open it up and let everybody know that we're going to have a good time tonight.
Amen.
Everybody say good time.
Good time. Good time.
In Houston, Texas.
Happy birthday, Bishop DeGeneva.
Oh, it's our anniversary too.
And happy anniversary. That's right. Okay.
Yes. So we're going to get started. We're going to jump right into it. And I wanted to ask, I know if everybody saw the sign that said the friendly shrine.
That's
and
it.
I wanted to ask Jaramogi if he could elaborate on why I know we talk about the mother shrine and then we talk about Fine 9. And I know we talked about the fineness of Shrine 9 because we have so many fine looking people in Shrine 9. That's my take on that. But here in Houston, I want to know, why did we call Shrine 10 the friendly shrine?
Well, there was an emphasis on friendliness because everybody was afraid of us.
Yeah.
When we first came to town, Houston didn't have much tradition of Black militancy. It was a sleepy little town, and when we arrived, it was kind of like a shock to. We bought the biggest church in town. We bought an apartment complex. We moved 60 people at one time into the city, and it was the kind of thing that was unheard of. And so they were a little afraid of us, a little intimidated. And then we started talking the Black stuff, and they were really intimidated. So we placed emphasis on being friendly. And Jaramogi, that's when we started singing gospel music. He said we had to have all of the elements of a traditional Baptist church in terms of people feeling comfortable in our environment, our atmosphere. But at the same time, the message had to be revolutionary and called them into, they would relax and kind of feel familiar. And then the message would hit home, bringing Black Christian nationalism to them. So it was an emphasis on being friendly and non-threatening, and putting people at ease that were kind of intimidated by what they saw of us originally.
I mean, that was a story in and of itself, right? Just the purchase of that sanctuary. Because I remember you shared that story before, how I think it was it Judson Robinson that was showing you and
Judson Robinson, the first Black city councilman, he's also a real estate agent. And he had gone to school with Cardinal Caramo, Ryan Hewitt at Fisk. They had played football together. And that goes all the way back into how we ended up in Houston in the first place. But the church wasn't for sale. And what he was showing Jaramogi when they went around town was not anything that Jaramogi was interested in buying. He said, I don't want these little ghetto churches. And he said, I can't sell you what people aren't willing to sell. And so Jaramogi, they were riding down the street going to get some lunch, and Jaramogi said, what about that building there? And he said, that's the white folks' church. And Jaramogi said, do they want to sell? because there's a little bit of reverse gentrification going on at the time where Black people were flooding into the areas where this had been a white segregated church, and it had been also a segregation academy. The classroom next door was a segregation academy so that white kids wouldn't have to go to school with Black children after the Brown versus Board of Education decision.
So you're talking
So
about the training center, right?
in the training center,
We call it the training center, yeah.
that was a 65 classroom building. And so they went in and talked to the people, and they were really looking to get out because their members had moved on, and they just wanted to know if we had the money. And Jaramogi and Sala came to worship with them on Sunday, and they went back in the back office after service and hammered out a deal. And so we bought the church. So this was not the kind of church that Black people had in Houston. And that caught everybody by surprise. So that was a part of the startling effect that it had on the community. Then we bought the apartments down the street, and that was startling. Then you had the Maccabees walking around there in those intimidating uniforms, and that was startling. So it was, we had to make an effort to be friendly.
And you mentioned Houston, but can you go deeper into that? Like, why Houston? Of all the places that we could have gone.
Well, before the governing body for the nation, before the Bishops' Council, was a thing called the National Staff. National Staff was in Detroit, and it was in the National Staff where discussions were going on about expansion. The only, like me and Olu were the kind of young bucks. We got to be on the National Staff, but we couldn't say much. But we got to be there. So I had a eyewitness.
Wait. You and Olu couldn't say much.
No, we couldn't say. We were young bucks on, and the more seasoned people who were planning, buying buildings, moving to here and moving there, they were the ones on the National Staff. They brought us in so that they would have some continuity of leadership. And so we sat there and watched the debates about where to go. General Masai wanted to go to Kansas City. There were some people who wanted to go to Dallas. There was one person wanted to go to Phoenix. And Karamo, because he had gone to school with Judson Robinson and his brother Jim, and they played football together, he made a call and Judson said, come on down. He was the first Black city councilman in Houston. And so Karamo, Nataki, Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, and Jaramogi went down to Houston, and they hit it off with Judson, became big buddies, and saw that through his real estate agency that we could make this happen. And so that we chose Houston over Kansas City, over Phoenix, over Dallas. And the other thing is that Houston seemed to have more promise because there was a oil boom going on, and it was if any sister that could type 60 words a minute could get a job just like that. So we started having classes for sisters in Houston and Atlanta so that they could get up to 60 words a minute and could be transferred to Houston and get a job, because those jobs that they got actually paid for the care of the advanced cadre, the engineering cadre, and the work they were doing on rehabbing the property, both at the apartments and at the church.
So the leadership of the nation hit it off with Judson Robinson. So it seems like it's a go, but it couldn't have all been, no problems. There had to be some challenges encountered when establishing the church in Houston. Can you share what some of those were?
Well, yeah, I wasn't supposed to come with the original cadre, but the Maccabees got in trouble in terms of the image that they portrayed to the community, and then rumors started flying around about this Black militant armed paramilitary group that was buying this property. And so we started getting investigated by the Texas Rangers and the Houston Police Department. And Jaramogi said, I need somebody that is not afraid to talk to these people. And so 2 weeks before the cadre left, he told me, you're going to go to Houston. So that was my job, to come down and to be the head of security and to be a go-between with these law enforcement agencies. And so the difficulties were, like I had mentioned, the white folks were scared of us, the black folks were scared of us. And we had to try to build some bridges between us. The thing that, in trying to build bridges with the community, the advantage that we had was that people didn't really understand that we were connected at the top. The big black people that ran businesses and banks and stuff like that, through Judson Robinson, we were connected with them from the very beginning, before the cadre even got here. We actually had business partnerships with Max Hanna and John B. Coleman and all the big muckety mucks in Houston. We already had relationships with them. And like Bill Lawson, the big Baptist church, Progressive Baptist church pastor, he was familiar with the Shrine and was friendly and tried to explain who we were to the other pastors. Now, the other pastors, they were afraid of us because they thought we were going to steal all the young people out of their church. So they started putting out all these ugly rumors about us in order to discourage their young people from running to the Shrine. Because in the late 70s, churches weren't attracting young black people, and the only church that was the Shrine. So they were afraid that the Shrine was going to end up with all their young people, and they were going to be out in the cold. So they badmouthed us pretty significantly.
I heard some of that bad mouth. The first thing I ever heard about the Shrine of the Black Madonna, I remember me and my dad, this is when I was a kid, we were driving down MLK, and I said, "What's that?" He said, "Oh, that's that old Jim Jones church." So the bad mouthing worked. I mean, it was there. But you mentioned a whole lot of advantages of being in Houston, being able to work through, the bad mouthing and all that. So can you touch on the impact that the Shrine has had on the Houston community?
Well, that's really a mouthful, and we could spend a whole program on just that. Houston was at the time, Houston was still a sleepy Southern traditional city. It was white folks running stuff and black folks and Mexicans doing the work. What Jaramogi noticed almost as soon as we got here was that if black people and Hispanics came together, we could run the city. And so he initiated this coalition politics seminar, where we got in touch with the Hispanic organizations. We went to their offices and talked with them at LULAC and the other places. And we developed relationships and told them what our plans were. We also went to the black organizations, the NAACP, the Urban League, to the politicians, and explained what we had traditionally done through the Black Slate and how this offered us an opportunity to be able to take political control of the city. So we had a seminar. Jaramogi invited Andrew Young, who was at the time U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. That drew a lot of attention, a lot of press. We had a very large crowd. Sanctuary was full. White folks were nervous. And it was presented that if we worked together, we could have a much more significant role in the city than we'd had before. And that was a big change in the nature of the city, because even though Black people and Hispanic people together constituted the majority of the city, the power brokers were all white. So we began to move into politics, and it began to change things around the city. We really changed who was on city council, who was a state representative, who was the mayor, who were the judges. And so it made that impact was a different way of thinking, and that paradigm shift in consciousness was caused by that first seminar. And then we brought the Black Slate in to fight to try to save Black judges who were under attack because white folks claimed they were soft on crime. And each of the Black candidates was trying to fight their own campaign. And we convinced them that you don't have to fight your own campaign. We can put you on the Black Slate and then we can all fight for each other together. And so we launched the Black Slate and the effort to save the Black judges. And that was something very different for them, something they had never seen. As a matter of fact, Dr. John B. Coleman and Judson Robinson asked for a box of Black Slate t-shirts so they could send them to their children at Fisk, because this kind of political activity is something Houston isn't known for, and they wanted to show that they had some progressive Negroes in Houston too.
Yeah, and those bigwigs that benefited from the Black Slate, they still to this day talk about that Black-Brown unity that was formed. And I'm curious, because you talked about the other ministers bad-mouthing the Shrine, but we were still connected. How was the Shrine able to become accepted by the community? Because I know right now we're a long-standing member in Operation Unity, working with all these different community organizations at a almost unparalleled level. So how were we able to move from, these crazy rumors to where we are now?
It's funny you mention that, because even the Black organizations found us to be threatening initially, because we were so much more organized. We had so many more resources, and they were just not used to a Black group having what we had. And so it kind of, the people who had been traditionally the Black vanguard in Houston was kind of put off by the level of organization that we had. But we had convinced them that we weren't trying to take over, that we invited them in. They used our resources. The Nation of Islam used our resources. Shape Center used our resources. National Black United Front, they used our resources. And so it became a friendly relationship where we were cooperating. And actually, the Operational Unity Network was created out of our cooperation with the local Black groups. So we, through the friendliness, through changing our demeanor as an organization into being more of a traditional church from outward appearance and from experience in service, and from the fact that we were in the street every day. We weren't doing missionary outreach for the first year and a half in Houston. We were doing totally community outreach. We were in the streets every day. And so we talked to a lot of people, and they, it's easy to declare a group to be a certain kind of way, but once you encounter individuals and personalities and they get to know you, it turns into a different kind of thing. And so those were the things that kind of broke down the barriers. And once we began providing services and classes, doing stuff for the public good, by the time we started doing that, most of the opposition waned, at least among the more intelligent aspects of the community.
And can you speak to the cultural center's role in all of this, in the development of our region and development of those really positive, powerful relationships?
Well, I'm gonna let Naila deal with that one.
Reverend?
All right. I'm just going to give a brief history of the Houston Shrine Cultural Center and Bookstore. It began in Houston. It was housed in a very small room right behind Fellowship Hall. It was only open on Sundays, after church, or after events and classes that were held in Fellowship Hall. As a matter of fact, the bookstore in Houston was about the size of a one-car garage. And many of us may remember that the area in South Park between Griggs and Old Spanish Trail was long considered a high crime and violent area. As a matter of fact, the South Park bowling alley was right next to the Shrine Sanctuary on Martin Luther King. Our children would be outside playing during summer camp, and it was too much wrongdoing and violence going on. So we purchased it. We renovated, and it became the Shrine 10 Cultural Center and Bookstore with a grand opening December 8th, 1986. Now, the Cultural Center in Houston was like any other cultural center, selling books, artifacts, African art, clothing, jewelry. But the difference was it was a 40,000 square foot building, and it afforded us an opportunity to host large events like conferences, movies, political conferences, community meetings. We even had disaster relief programs and a regular African history and Black reality class that every week would bring in over 100 people to get the information. Now, the Cultural Center in Houston has become the premier Black event center. Next month, the Cultural Center will be celebrating a 10-year anniversary for the Buy Black Marketplace. It started in 2012 after we successfully had several book and art fairs. Bishop Anika and I decided, well, let's do something for Buy Black Friday and for the holidays, getting people to support Black entrepreneurs. It was very slow in those 2 years, but then in 2014, with the death of Michael Brown, the brutal murder, we decided to change the whole motive in the Buy Black movement to withholding your dollars and put the money back into our community, intentionally recirculating the Black dollar. And this is 10 years and it's still going on. Today is more than a place of visit, the Cultural Center in Houston. It's a vital Black community center offering services, classes, and events. The primary contact for most people in Houston is the Shrine Cultural Center before they come to the church. The Cultural Center keeps the Shrine in the public eye as an authority on everything Black. Now, in terms of our relationships in the community, people use us as a go-to, what's going on in the city. They expect us to have information on everything. We have great relationships with all of the Black organizations. We partner with them to present more programming for enlightenment.
And you mentioned Bishop Anika Sauer, and I don't know if you all can see her or not right now, but she's dressed like Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek. Go ahead. Live
Yes,
long and
Anika.
prosper. Live long and prosper, Bishop Anika Sauer. And Naila, so Reverend Naila, excuse me. So you talked,
Right.
you gave us a powerful kind of overview. But can you talk about some more about some of that relief work? Because I remember truckloads of stuff coming in from states, not neighboring states, but I mean states far away. And they came to us to deliver those goods so that we could distribute. Can you speak to that a little more?
Yes, during Hurricane Harvey, we started a Shine On Houston Relief Center. And during those 4 months, we decided as a community service, we would contact people for donations and be a center for people to come and pick up food, clothing, whatever type of supplies that they needed. We had several deliveries of 18-wheelers, 40-foot trucks coming in, organizations donating to it. I mean, it was busy for 4 months. So we shut down all of our revenue generating activities to be of service in the community.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm
Well,
assuming, yes, sir.
I would like to add that the disaster relief effort started even before the Culture Center was renovated into the Culture Center. It started in 1980, 81 with Hurricane Alicia.
Wow.
That was the first time it was used as a disaster relief, and it was just a big open building. It hadn't been renovated yet. But in every hurricane since then, it's been a disaster relief site.
Wow, wow. That's powerful. And another thing that's powerful, and I know we don't even have time to get into it, is just to start listing the names of the folk who have come through, our cultural and event center and giving workshops and presentations. Dr. Betty Shabazz, Dr. Ben. I mean, you can go on and on and on and on. But I want to talk about the African Holocaust exhibit, and I want to shift to you, presiding bishop, because you've told this story before about how we received pushback for even naming it the African Holocaust exhibit, but that pushback eventually turned into the community support. Can you share that story with us?
Yeah, the Jewish community tended to think that Holocaust was a word that could only be associated with their traumatic experience during World War II. And so our use of the word Holocaust offended them. And they came to the Culture Center to register their complaints. And when they came to the Culture Center to register their complaints about our advertisement of an African Holocaust conference, they found out that Dr. Leonard Jeffries from New York was going to be our keynote speaker, and they considered him the devil, anti-Semite on another level. And so because he was talking about Black people's suffering during the Middle Passage, the Ma'afa, the African slave trade. And so they fought us. When we didn't back down and reject our invitation of Dr. Jeffries, they told us, we'll ruin you. And, we told them good luck. And they started calling around to find out if we had any loans on all these properties that we own. And they came to find out that we didn't have any loans. So then they started calling on their allies in the Black community, the leadership they supported. And the Black people in the communities, the NAACP and the Urban League and other pastors and stuff, they told them, if we renounce the shrine, we can't be of any use to you because we won't have any credibility in the community. The shrine is respected and loved in this community, and there's no way that we could go against them and have any credibility. So then they figured that they had overstepped their bounds, and so they asked for a meeting, and we met in the basement of Wheeler Street Baptist Church. We met in the basement. We went down there and argued, me and Ada Edwards. We went down there and argued, and when they figured out we weren't scared of them, we weren't asking for anything, that we were secure, their whole tone changed. They fired the whole staff of the Anti-Defamation League, and they brought their national officers in from California. And they sat down with us and kind of patched things up. And we ended up getting a unity award from the NAACP because they were trying to say, it was their way of saying they messed up, They should not have gone that far, and we didn't know who y'all were.
But now they know.
Now they know.
Now they know. Amen, amen, amen. Can you speak to the missionary training institutes, their role in the building and development of Shrine 10 in Houston, Texas?
Well, the way the Martin Luther King corridor is constructed, there were a lot of large apartment buildings right there next to each other. We started off buying 5702s, a 30-unit building for the original cadre. But in 1985, we sought to have another place for members who might want to relocate to be near the church. And so in 1985, we bought 5,500 Martin Luther King, which is a 65-unit building. And we created the Order of Nehemiah to do the renovations on the building. We recruited people with construction skills from around the country, brought them in, and began the process of rehabbing the property. A couple years later, we bought 5,400, which is 55-unit apartment complex, and added that to our apartments. So we ended up owning the whole strip along Martin Luther King of apartments. And it changed the area because these apartment buildings that we were buying were high crime areas. And the highest crime area was a place called the Bucket of Blood, which was a 300-unit apartment complex. And there was all kind of drugs and prostitutions and mayhem and gunfights. And it was like we'd be on the porch of our apartments we looking at a movie, the most violent movie you ever saw, going on right across from us. So we bought the Bucket of Blood out of self-defense. We said we had to get this element out of the area. Well, when we bought the Bucket of Blood, we were heroes because the people in the community that own homes, their homes stopped getting broken into. And the police officer who was the lieutenant for that area, he was promoted to to deputy chief because his crime rates went down so dramatically. It didn't have anything to do with what the police did. It had to do with the fact that we bought out all the centers of crime. And so that we owned everything for about a quarter mile on one side of the street. And that changed the area and made it right for development. And people started looking at it as a place where they might be able to come in and build something because nothing had been built along that corridor for 30 years. So it changed the whole area. And it had a lot to do with changing our relationship with the people in the area too, because they were really grateful that their homes, which was their largest investment, had been preserved and protected by us developing that property. So we ended up with over 500 units of housing, but the Bucket of Blood never got developed. It was in such bad shape that we couldn't just go in and rehab it. So we decided to tear it down and create Marcus Garvey Park. Together, all those properties linked together, we renamed the Missionary Training Institute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that wasn't the only community revitalization, because years later there was that whole Upper MLK revitalization project. And can you speak to that, and what were some of the changes to the community that were brought about from that?
Well, the Upper MLK project was my first foray into community development in that way. It was the train line that had just been approved was coming somewhere in Southeast Houston because eventually they wanted to go out to Hobby Airport. The first proposal was for the train line to go down Scott and end at the southeast bus center there next to the CVS on Scott and what is that, Holcomb?
OST.
OST. No, that's a Griggs. Griggs and then Holcomb. Griggs and Scott. What we proposed was having the train line come down Martin Luther King. Now, our interest was it was going to make our property a lot more valuable. And it also was going to make it easier to get to the shrine and that general area. So we had a battle. There was a group on one side proposing Scott and a group on the other side proposing Martin Luther King. But me and the founder of KIPP went to see the president, the chancellor of the University of Houston, and convinced her that, you know, if you allow for it to come down Martin Luther King, it'll come down two sides of the university. She said it was already coming down one side. I said, yeah, but if it had to go over to Martin Luther King, it would come down two sides. So once we got U of H, KIPP, and the Shrine to petition the city, they decided that they might consider coming down Martin Luther King. But you still had some powerful figures that wanted to come down Scott. The deciding factor was there was an esplanade in the middle of Martin Luther King that was like little islands, like in a boulevard, so that they wouldn't have to buy additional land for the train line to come. So they finally decided Martin Luther King, and that allowed our property to expand in value. As a matter of fact, the property that we have on Martin Luther King today is more valuable than when we had the whole Missionary Training Institute, because the train line makes it more valuable. But that was an idea to bring in KIPP. The library was being built. The Houston Texans football team had a YMCA was just being built. The Peck Elementary School,
which was not going to be built down the street from us until the development.
None of that was going to be built. It all came into the train line, and what we did allowed for people to start investing in the area and change in the area. The Oasis apartments. Today, there is a townhouse network going in across the street from the Culture Center where 40 townhouses are being built. And next to Oasis down by the bayou, there's another 37 townhouses being built. That whole complex of development, the medical school that U of H just built, all the large apartment buildings on the corners of Martin Luther King and OST and Martin Luther King and Griggs, all that came about because of this effort to revitalize Upper Martin Luther King and to designate it as a special area. We marketed it that way, and it's worked out.
It has worked out, and I believe Peck Elementary was about to be closed down, but then HSC decided to renovate it, right?
Right.
Were there any initiatives? I'm asking the question I think I know the answer to. Were there any initiatives or programs that allowed the entire nation to come to Houston, fellowship or work, organize or strategize?
Well, we started to have, our synods. The synods that we had, it was easy to have them in Houston because we had the housing. We had the housing, we had the largest church building. We had the facilities to host the whole church. So it became routine that large national gatherings would be in Houston. Jerome just said it was simpler. We didn't have to buy hotel rooms and all that kind of thing. And when the hotel rooms would supplement, but we had enough units of housing to lower our expenses by providing housing for a lot of the people that came to town. And then we got deals with hotels to provide housing for the rest of them. So the synods, the tributes to our founder, those all became it became a standard to have them in Houston because of the facilities and the size of our buildings.
Can you share what was the impact and the benefit of having the Holy Patriarch here in Houston for all those many years?
Oh, it was indescribable, really.
Yeah.
It made such a difference because he was able to direct the development of the nation personally. He was able to, we weren't left to guess what we needed to do. He was right there to tell us exactly what to do. And we benefited immensely from theological development to program development, the development of the devotional, the development of the total house. All those were things that were being done. The development of the community, of the cultural center as a community center. All those things were being done at his direct instruction. A lot of times, people didn't know certain things. Most of the changes in the nation, Jaramogi did them before he passed away. People may have found out about him later on, but most of the things, he had regular conversations where we were talking about direction, purpose, what we need to change, what we needed to develop, what we needed to do differently. And so we had a regular think tank going on, and he was directing that think tank. And that's eventually why the leadership from Houston ended up going to Atlanta and to Detroit, because he wanted leadership that was more in line with his conception of the nation and where it ought to be going.
Wow.
I think that's a powerful experience, because when we talked about the fact that we had people from Detroit, from Atlanta, from Houston, living together, working together. You had two Maccabees doing tours of duty where they would go to different regions. It's like even before we got into this virtual space, we were meshing and coming together from all different regions. People who come from Philadelphia, who come from, like I know you mentioned how every church, every center or city we went to, there were people who were coming not just from one location, but from everywhere, coming together to join our movement.
Yeah, it was, and we were welcoming. I mean, it wasn't like we did not act. We didn't put people off because they were from someplace else. We welcomed people because Jaramogi was a gracious man, and he was about the liberation of Black people. And the one thing he could not stand was plantation politics, where you were so proud of the place that you were in that it was the only place in the world. He couldn't stand that. He said, we're all in the same struggle. We welcome brothers and sisters from everywhere. If they've been in another region, they get a chance to serve here if they decide to serve here. As long as they serve, and it doesn't make a difference. And we welcome them with open arms. So, you know, that was kind of like an extension of our being a friendly shrine, is that we welcome people from other places and made them feel comfortable in their home.
And Houston welcomed one brother from Detroit, Judas Molokai. He ended up marrying one of Ebony Worthen's finest sisters. Lord have mercy. Lord, Lord, Lord. Jaramogi, we're almost out of time. I want to ask this final question and hand it over to Bishop DeGenova. But what do you see as the future of the shrine in Houston?
I think in Houston, we have stumbled upon the kind of church that we need to be in the future, which kind of mirrors the way that Shrine One was in the early 60s. Through the Culture Center, we've become a community hub where we're relied upon for programs, services, activities. People come and have a good time. And with the younger people turning away from traditional Christianity and churches in general, this becomes a way for us to engage the community with a non-religious community interest approach, where people come to a soul patrol and they party until deep into the night. They come to classes and activities. They come to hear speakers and lectures. They come for the Buy Black Marketplace and for food truck festivals and for outdoor bands. It becomes a way to have a relationship with the community that is not simply on religious grounds. Early people that joined the Shrine were not joining a quote unquote church. They were joining a series of community enterprises, social advancement activities. And then they found out that, oh, this is all undergirded by a church with a different kind of theology. I think that the church is a hard sell as the initial contact with the general community. And it's particularly hard with young people today who looks at all churches with a suspicious eye. But by coming into the activities that we're having, into drumming classes, into dance classes, into yoga classes, into Kwanzaa classes, into conferences, to hear speakers, book signings, it creates an enlightened community. Houston is actually, the Culture Center is a center of the conscious community in Houston. And people, as they participate in that community, they start to filter off into the church to check it out. And they find out that it's not the same thing as what they grew up with or what they're used to. So I think that approach is an approach that we want to share and spread to other places so that we can encounter people from all areas of life and get them interested in what we're doing for Black people before they get interested in the church proper. And to see the church as the kind of spiritual foundation for all that activity. And so therefore, it being more of a African-centered theology dedicated to the liberation of Black people, rather than the traditional church with the traditional sin, redemption, salvation theology. I think that's the way we have to go. And I think we'll have more success if we can replicate the model everywhere else. We will be relevant and engaged with the people that are progressive in every community.
Amen. Amen. Is there anything you wanted to share about the history of the Shrine in Houston that I didn't ask about?
Pardon?
Is there anything that you wanted to share that I may not have asked about the Shrine here in Houston?
No, I think in a real way, I mean, Detroit always was conscious. I think in Atlanta was a sleepy little town. It didn't really have progressive expressions of religion. I think in Atlanta and Houston, we changed the consciousness of Black people in those communities. I've been in Atlanta for quite a while. I've probably spent more than 12 years there. But in Houston, the difference, I think it's pretty much the same effect, but we changed what Black people thought about Black people and what Black people thought was possible. And I think that's a greater legacy than buildings and programs. The fact that we changed the trajectory of the consciousness of the Black people. You know, Atlanta got 6.1 million people and Houston got 7.2 million people in the metro area. And when you consider that a couple million of those people are Black, we ought to be able to engage those communities and have greater numbers if we're really trying to liberate Black people and engage and reach out and to deal with those people. And I think that what we've created is a model for doing that. We just got to work a little harder.
Let the church say amen and I share.